So, all right. Well, what I've got, I've been to many conventions, and oftentimes my laptop has been used for presenters, and it's amazing how many presentations get saved to my hard drive in that process.
Nice.
And what I've got this evening is and I'm not even sure how I acquired these, but these are two presentations on elevators and feed mills in Kansas by Ken Jenkins. I toured Ken's layout at the NMRA National in Kansas City a few years back. Beautiful layout, gorgeous grain elevators and feed mills with all the piping and overhead this and that, etc. And he did a clinic there. And I think that, I don't know how I got the copies of these PowerPoint presentations, but this is his work. I'm just going to show you the pictures and explain a little bit about what I think he meant to say, and it's you're just going to enjoy. But this is the Kansas division of the Rock Island, and if I can make this work the way I want it to, there we go. Yeah, you notice he's got these well labeled before elevators, and of course here's a photo of a couple of wheat farmers out west with their Model T dumping wheat into a Milwaukee boxcar.
Wow.
So, and I've had this particular photo for quite a while. It's an interesting photo, so I'm familiar with it. Now here is the first elevators. He says were built in rural areas, were generally wood construction, either crib construction or studded frame construction. And note he says crib construction, don't confuse with corn crib. Crib construction is where they would take the 2x6s or 2x8s and lay them flat so that you only were building 2 inches at a time upward. And you would have a wall that would be 6-8 inches wide of solid wood. And you can see here where they got some pieces sticking out that they can stand on as they work their way up. And that's the typical construction of your wood grain elevators. They'd be 40, 50, 60, 80 feet tall. And these would be solid wood walls. And sometimes you would see these boards running through from side to side to tie them together. So let's see, cribbing is strong. It doesn't require a lot of extra stiffeners, whereas but you get into the studded frame, which we're more familiar with house framing, and they required reinforcement and tension bars. You'd see this, a piece of wood or metal across with the big bolt heads through with rods going all the way through, holding things together. This is a cribbed elevator here. It says it holds 35,000 bushels, whereas the studded construction was limited. It held 10,000. It just didn't have the structural strength to hold things together. Now, of course, I may be making this up. I don't know what Ken would say. So if you have questions, asked. Reinforcement timbers, etc. But here's some drawings that he has found of typical grain elevators. And what you've got is in the center part, you have the head house, and on either side, you have the bins. And you can see from up here, there'd be a number of bins standing next to each other. So you might have corn in one and wheat in another, etc. Or you might have wetter grain and drier grain. And the center part was the head house for raising the grain up, and they would use the various pipes, etc., to go and fill the bins. And down on the bottom was the collection place where the conveyor belt system would pick up the grain where it's been dumped from a wagon or a truck. This is what this opening is over here for us, to drive through and dump your grain and into the hopper in the bottom, and there'd be a conveyor, and buckets would haul it up to the top. It would go through the grain head and down whatever chute. I can't remember an odd name for the wheel up at top with all the different chutes. But these can be pretty complex buildings, though the way we build them, we don't often, as modelers, we're not so much interested in the interior unless we're someone like a Rod Thompson who's got a scratch build every last nail. I just want the Walther structure put there so it looks like a grain elevator.
I don't know if that's a compliment or critic.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, I see. I just pushed the next slide button. We're looking at a farmer's elevator and feed greening in Ritter, Iowa. But a little bit of a close-up of what I was just describing, the drive-through here and stuff. So Rod, take that as a compliment. So you do great modeling. So but let's
Thank
see
you.
what, yes,
Thank you.
yeah. And here's
Okay.
another drawing that he has found where you can, this is, the driveway where they're dumping in the chute goes to the bottom, and what you've got is a conveyor with a whole bunch of buckets on it. And they go up, and this distributor is called something like a gimbal or something like that. I can't remember for sure. And filling all the different bins. And this is called the grain leg. And then of course, when you get ready to fill a boxcar or later a hopper car, you'd empty the bin out, it would go into the conveyor system up again and out, and then out to the pipe to the waiting rail car. They
Doug?
also had a grain cleaner involved in a lot of these operations. So,
Doug,
yes,
can I add something? Up at the top, on most grain elevators, they would have that's how they would determine, they would have a weight so that you'd fill that up, it holds so many bushel and then it would dump it. That's how they knew how many bushel they were putting in the bins and things.
oh, yes, there was some sort of a something to hold the grain that was coming out of that belt conveyor. That's right. Yeah.
Also in the driveway area, a lot of them had, in Minnesota anyway, any of the ones my uncle worked at, they had scales in them. So that as soon as the grain was brought in, before it was even dumped, it was weighed. So that was how the farmer got paid for what was being dumped or being
Yeah,
sold.
here in Iowa, the scales were typically outside on that driveway next to the office building or something, and they would weigh the truck or the wagon before it went up and dumped. But yeah, scales were involved. So let's see. Okay, here's some information on elevators defined as capacity in bushels. So, and all this, this stuff you guys can look up, but you can see a standard 40-foot boxcar, 3,837 cubic feet, would hold so many, bushels of, oats, corn, milo, wheat, soybeans, typical were the crops that were coming in. So, and then of course this is a boxcar. We got loading, but notice in this photo, you've got, it looks like paper sticking out around the boxcar. That means this boxcar has been sealed for grain service, that they have lined, you've got a paper or wood grain door on the inside, and then they've lined the seams here with a paper or tape to keep the dirt and residue from blowing in and keep grain from blowing out. And there was a standard, putting the grain doors in and filling all the voids and holes inside the cars were called coopering, and they would cooper a car before they loaded it. So let's see what we got coming up next. Okay, here we can see.
Check those trucks out.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so
Wow. Hey, what is Milo?
Milo is a small grain that you will find in the bird seed that you buy at the local hardware store.
And birds don't eat it.
Yeah.
It's honest to God. And ask any bird. I've been feeding birds for many years. All it does is it's a filler for the bird seed. They do not eat it. So you can buy product without it, and you don't want Milo in it in the bird seed.
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Yeah, so I know it's a grain, and I'm not sure what it's used for.
It's the size of a BB, and it looks like orangish in color or yellowish.
Yep. So it's a little round.
Lester,
Okay.
I buy the standard Ace Hardware birdseed, and every night the raccoons come and lick every bit of that seed up, and they leave a completely clean tray
Yep. Yep.
every
I
single
have-
night.
So,
I
well, you
have the
notice the-
blackbirds doing that,
yeah.
and the wood ducks.
Yeah. So anyway, back to the slide here. It says after unloading, you'll notice that there was a paper grain door in this UP boxcar, and you can see where they've just cut the opening in there to unload the car. So, some basic
Wow.
information, elevators approximately every several miles. That's because when they built the railroads, they had to put a water tank about every 7 miles. And that's where you tended to find stock pens and grain elevators, where the water tanks were. That's where towns got started. He's got some information because a 14-mile buggy wagon trip to and from, well, that's, I know in the state of Iowa, every county is about 25 miles square. So the courthouse was no more than 12 or 14 miles from any resident in the county. So they could, in one day, take their buggy into town and back and get their taxes paid type of thing. So just some fun facts there. Let's see. 40-foot boxcar, 5 feet deep, about 1,400 bushels. So moisture content, of course, is very important related to the grain, because I know the more moisture, the heavier the grain is. I can recall one time seeing one of those semi-grain trailers split open, parked along the side of the road, because he was hauling wet grain and it was too much. His trailer couldn't handle it. But here we're going to be looking at different parts of grain elevators. Of course, the load and unload area, the grain dryers, etc. Let's see what happens when I click the button again. Corrugated galvanized steel, have to be water resistant siding. So we started seeing the galvanized steel corrugated, originally wood clapboard siding. Then we started seeing the later poured concrete, which is something that I know Ron is interested at this point. So, and here we can see a couple of Ken's models. He is modeling the Rock Island in Kansas. Like I said, he's just got some superb models on his layout. So let's see, unloading and loading, the trucks and the grain cars. Originally, the farmers bringing in wagons, and they started buying trucks. And I know a lot of our small grain elevators that have died out in the 70s was as farmers started moving to semi-grain trailers. The drive-through on the old small grain elevators was too small. They couldn't get the semis through there. And that's what killed those elevators off as much as the railroads insisting on 50-car and then later 100-car trains. So, but here you can see, he's showing various models here of the truck driveways coming in, and then of course the loading spouts on various styles and types of grain elevators. And you can look around the country, and Ron's been sharing photos with us that, yeah, they're standard designs, but it's like every grain elevator seems to be different. So, and I mentioned the multiple bins allow you to store different types of grain, and of course the different grades of grain. You have your number 2 seed corn, or your number 2 corn, your yellow corn they call it. If it's wet, it gets docked for being too much moisture. If there's seed corn, that's different than a feed grain. Just all kinds of stuff. So let's see. I want to go back. I'm going to try to go back and look at this one again. I'm as curious about this because I copied it, but I haven't had it too much in my possession. Oh well. Elevator heads, the top of the elevator. This is where all the mechanisms are held. You've got the mixer, the elevators, the dust spout, the vertical legs, which would be the grain legs going up and down, and the delivery pipes. You can see it's got some cross sections here, longitude. And these drawings, almost all of these you can find on the internet anymore if you know how you're looking. So let's see. Okay, he's gone around taking photos of all these grain elevators built models of. And you can see he's got someone standing there, and he's using a measuring stick that I believe is the standard 5 or 6 foot high, and he's painted every foot an alternating color. So you can see the red and the white and the red and white. And this must be a 5-foot stick because he's got 5 paint splotches there.
There's 6.
No, there's 6. I'm sorry, you're right. 6. 6-foot stick.
Yeah.
And so you can quickly, by holding that stick up there when you're taking a photo, you can quickly later look and say, oh, I can measure that and see how big these openings are for doors and windows. How high is that loading dock? That type of thing. And so I know that modelers for years have carried these type of photo sticks with them. So let's see what now some of the photo details is a grain dryer. And I know Walther's published, they had a kit for a grain dryer out for a while. These are some concrete elevators. These are grain the metal grain bins, and you can see the exposed grain leg going up to the top of the head. This grain elevator has got what we would call a head house, but you've also got a grain leg on the side of it. And so these are all interesting details that you use wires and drinking straws and styrene tubing and all kinds of stuff to create models of. Okay, so he's using his dimensional stick, the photo, and then he's using that to determine the exterior elevations of drawings. And once you get a basic elevation one way, if you've got any skills at all with using a architect's rule or a scale drawing rule, you can do a pretty simple pencil diagram here to get you started. Unless you're Clark Props, then you just start cutting styrene and slapping it together to make, if it looks good, he may measure afterwards, but Clark doesn't usually go to this detail. So, and there he is with his measuring stick. All right, well, now we're looking at a hall, mill, and elevator in Bellevue, Kansas. And you can see his scratch-built model. Here's the photo of the prototype, and then based on his photos and the drawings that he made, he scratch-built. And like I said, he builds beautiful scratch-built grain elevators. The silo scratch-built, here's grain elevator with the reinforcement bars, the addition extension going out there. There's the delivery, he even got a modern dumpster sitting out here. Even though the period trucks predate this dumpster by years.
Yeah.
So here's some more photos of this model, the various delivery pipes at different heights. So some more shots of that elevator. They even got a couple of those John Deere tractors that needs the front end narrowed. So,
Yeah.
Sacks of grain. Purina Chow sign, you can find this on the internet and print it out on your color printer. Once you resize it, you can resize it in a program like PowerPoint or any photo program, or even in something like Paint, which tends to be free with most Windows-based computers. Oh, what do we get? A blank screen, and we saw that one. There we go. Okay, he built his grain bin from some PVC pipe, which a lot of us are doing. And then you see down here in the corner, because there's a feed mill, he's got a small tank for molasses. So he can mix molasses, feed mills would often receive molasses in tank cars for mixing of certain types of feed, particularly horse feed would contain molasses. I know that from owning a horse once for a while. So let's see there's his dust collector on the top. Black paint to represent the tar seam. Again, just a nice, you can see the prototype details on the left, and you can see the model details on the right as he's done it. Now we're switching to Super Sweet Seed and Feed in Riley, Kansas. Super Sweet Feeds was a big name brand here in the Midwest at one time. And you can see his grain elevator complex with here's the old wooden bodied with the annexes built onto it. Here's the drive-in dumper, outgoing dock, and the little office. So and there's a trackside view, the head house clear at one end of this is a large annex onto it, and then a horizontal conveyor to move grain to the various bins as he's duplicated it, the head house and the delivery. Just some nice modeling and his weathering and painting techniques. He's just got these down just wonderful. So then notice even the detail, the spout comes out, and then you've got the chute coming out of the bottom and with a slight bend so it can come out to the hopper car, or you've got the one that goes lower for loading a box car in. The corrugated iron roof with a little hint of rust to it. Okay, and this is the Perina Feed Mill and Clay Center, Kansas. And he's showing you the original wooden elevator was built there, and then later the concrete silo additions. These started showing up in the 50s particularly, and on. So I think maybe the late 40s. Here you got your grain dryers, all with all the head house and the delivery pipes and things. You can see this is quite a complex. It's just not a simple little grain elevator or a couple of PVC pipes. So here's a close-up shot of, okay, we got a scale house in there. We got a couple of small bins with cattle feed in them and a larger bin. So not sure what kind of chemicals are getting delivered there in the tank car, but I think Hooker Chemicals was mostly known for dynamite and things like that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You gotta pull the pipe.
Maybe they got some stumps to blow up.
Yeah, maybe. So, yeah. But here you can see some of the details, and he's got them labeled for you. It just,
Yeah, he knows his stuff.
yes, he does. He spent you can tell he spent some time studying this, going out there, doing field research, photographs and drawings, and and when you live next door to it, it's fairly easy to figure out how to model it. So I know he's out there in those western suburbs of Kansas. So
Sure.
or Kansas City, I mean, I did in the state of Kansas, but just now let's jump on to, okay, this is Valley Feed in Morganville, Kansas. Again, we've got, you can see the old wood grain elevator over here with some bins, looks like clay tile bins from the covering. We got concrete silo bins. We got the metal corrugated iron bins. It looks like another old grain elevator over there. Okay, two of them built in 1887, probably competitors. Okay, we got a grain dryer down in there with some very big Butler bins. These Rick Racks makes bins in plastic like this, and then there's somebody else who's doing grain belt models or something like that, and they also are offering these. And then there's a couple companies now are doing them in 3D printed stuff, so you can create these type scenes. All right, this is Morganville Co-op, 1969. Again, the wood grain elevator with the reinforcement bars. And then we've got what looks like an early concrete style elevator with the rounded hood cover. And then we got the more modern corrugated iron. Well, look at that grain head. Wow. All the stairways going up.
Oh.
And he's got delivery pipes and conveyors going into the wall like there's more behind the wall.
Pretty elaborate.
Yes, it is. Look at that. Just. But it sure makes a nice scene on the layout, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want you to dust it.
Well, let's move on with that comment. Here's the Shippers Co-op feed in Clifton, Kansas. Here, we've got several annex buildings here with, this looks like one of those square concrete type structures that's been covered with some corrugated iron. Again, exposed grain head up there and dust collectors and stuff. Says it's got 16 bins in there, so There's a close-up of some of the dust collectors. Okay, then look, here's the grain head here with the caged ladder going up, and then here we've got the mixer or gimbal or whatever it's called with all the different hoses, pipes going to the different bins as grain comes up to the top here and then comes down into, and this gets moved so that it will go to the correct bin.
The old elevators had a unit somewhat like that. They called it Gerber.
Gerber, that's the word. Thank you, Bob. Yeah, they're Gerbers. I was saying gimbal, but it's a Gerber.
And don't ask me how I remembered that.
Well, I'm glad you did because I'd forgotten. So, okay, now here we've got he says this is a studded construction. It's got the reinforcements, and then the truck delivery drive is through the middle
Ah,
of the building. But
RDA.
yeah, this is the Agenda Co-op elevator in Agenda, Kansas. So. And there you can see the attention to detail on his delivery pipe and this is more of that co-op. We got some horizontal bins or the modern farm buildings, as we might call them. There's the vertical bins, the grain legs, and a screw delivery pipe. So there must be like an auger through here, like, a screw auger that would move it from one head to another grain bin. And again, the caged ladders. So this is set up delivery for hopper cars. Is the grain dryer down there. More of the dryers. If you're familiar at all with rural America and grain handling and dryers, you recognize this stuff. So. Oh, and of course, the dry bulk fertilizer building too, because if you're raising grain, you got to have fertilizer. So there's another thing for shipments on your layout.
sure.
But just look at the detail with these piping and everything for the grain dryers. You got a fan and blower in there and just. Pneumatic control orifice, but Bob's correct. It's called a Gerber. They were originally moved manually, but then this pneumatic, so this would be an air controlled. The guy down in the shack at the bottom could push a button and it would move that Gerber around, so it would
Mhm.
put the hole over the right pipe. Grain dryers, they varied a lot as well. Lonnie Bathurst over in the Collinsville RPM meet. His father-in-law had a grain dryer business and Lonnie worked for a while. And he did a great clinic on building a grain dryer based on that company's productions. I don't know, Ron, if you saw it when you were there. But it's,
I don't think I did.
That was a good one.
yep, it was. So opened my eyes to the different types and styles of grain dryers and how you would go about modeling them. So, and then I love this structure here he's got for holding the delivery pipe.
Yeah.
Just this guy's got an eye for detail.
Yeah.
Brown Burton grain, Manhattan, Kansas. You can see the older structures over here and then the round grain bins. You got the grain leg with the Gerber up there and the delivery pipes. Doesn't look like that'd be too difficult to model, does it?
No.
No, a lot of plastic sprue.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'd be become well acquainted with the Plastrux catalog and
Yeah.
evergreen styrene and
Yeah.
whoever makes the grain bins. So. Mhm. And that's the Super Sweet Annex Green in Riley, Kansas. Okay. So. And notice even the color of the grain head and the piping, he's. And I've seen these red type fans on the bottom of grain bins at farms when I've visited,
Right.
so.
Yep.
I know that's legit,
Is that a concrete base?
yes, that would be typical,
Yep.
grain bin would have you would pour a concrete pad and then erect the grain bin on top of it.
Right.
And the typical construction is you would lay out and build the roof first. Then you jack up the roof so many feet and you build one circle of panels. Then you
Ah,
jack up the roof and above that, another couple of feet, and you build another set of panels and slowly work your way up till you got the grain bin to the height you wanted.
ah,
That was how you built them without a crane. So
cool.
notice the propane tanks over here for running the dryers.
Right.
Yeah, it just.
You'd probably bring that in by rail, maybe. The propane, maybe.
Yeah,
You know the Butler size buildings?
yeah.
There was a guy down in either DeMott or Rensselaer who was a Butler dealer. And he set up a field that he built these buildings, these Butler buildings, or these grain tanks by the hundreds. And then he had a Sikorsky sky crane come pick them up and deliver
Wow.
them.
Wow.
This was in the 60s, and
Sure.
the sky crane was still in Army surplus colors.
Hmm.
So, he had a deal going on.
He did, yeah.
But he delivered these Butler buildings all over Indiana in like hours.
Wow, what a deal.
It was pretty impressive. And when you saw that flying, you're like, holy crap, look at that thing.
Ready to
That's amazing. So,
He got in trouble a little bit in the 70s because he did not use a union crane operator, which was required in those sky cranes. That wasn't a pilot's job. That was a union crane operator in a bucket or in a cockpit that operated the crane.
so,
Wow.
well, I know the original Butler grain bins were they were 16 foot in across,
Uh-huh.
and they were only about 12, 14 feet tall. And that's what was the standard Butler bin in 1938, 39, and probably up through the 40s. And then they started getting larger.
Ah,
Right.
Yeah.
I wonder what the timeline was on that.
Yeah. So, well, there's another truck delivery piping and detail. You see the different colors in there. The concrete base, the power pole. The modern grain bin is going to need electrical power, etc. So.
I'm just noticing the reinforcement rods is a nice touch.
Yep. And that's when you start looking at the new modern big corrugated grain bins, you'll see these. There's almost like a piece of rail on the outside, just holding everything steady.
Hmm.
Okay, how come we're. All right, there's the close up of the green. Yep. And that's it for this first part of the presentation. So I see it's just a few minutes after 7, but
Doug, I have a question.
yes,
Have you been to this layout?
I saw this about 4 or 5 years ago. Yes.
Can you explain how this is put into an operating session? Are each of these elevators a destination or a source to take?
Yes, yes, he's modeling as, the Kansas division of the Rock Island Railroad. So these are all different towns and locations stretched out along a track going across Kansas. And each grain elevator complex was basically a different town or different spot. And in operations, you would, the yard office would have, ABC grain elevator needs 4 cars to load today. EF elevator has got 3 cars to pick up and we need 5 box, cars empty. And then there would be the orders for, the propane coming in, the molasses, if they're in feed mill where they're mixing feed. And feed mills would not only be having grain come in from local fields, but also might be receiving grain from other locations, like the Milo might not be grown locally. It might be coming in so they can make up the bird seed that they're selling, that type of thing. So, yeah,
So
it would
would-
be just a typical operation, but.
So they
but
would
his
take
whole-
these, they would take these to an off site staging. And what happened to all that Kansas material? Did it go down to New Orleans for shipping, or?
I would say yes, that, from the 60s, 70s on, most grain was getting exported. A lot of it went into feed, for cattle feeding and hog feeds, chicken feed. But a good amount of it also headed south to the Gulf for overseas. So,
Thank
Could I
you.
add something, Doug?
yes.
Having switched a few elevators in central Illinois, as well as out in Kansas, the operation was, and we generally went at night because it was cooler. And when the winter wheat moved, it started in about April or May. And it was just all hands on deck. And one of the things that irritated us as operating people was the marketing guy went out and gave switch keys to every one of the elevators. So when they got them loaded, they'd shove them out, they'd be following the main line. Now, these were on old Santa Fe and Mopac branch lines for Watco. So when we came to town, it oftentimes, and I use the word town very liberally, because out there, it was an elevator, and you might be lucky to get a gas station and a restaurant. But that's about all that was in town. And so you come out there and you had all your empties behind you going west, and you had to figure out how to shove them all together and to make sure you could get around them. And oftentimes, if there was enough room, you'd shove the loads back to the east and spot the empties up so that they rolled towards the east. But when you came back at night, you would pick up the loads rather than handle them all the way to the other end of the line. That was stupid because it was more cars than you needed to handle.
Yeah,
And then
that
the
makes
other
sense.
thing that Kansas was doing an awful lot of, and you can see it in elevators all over now, is some kind of a non-hazardous fertilizer that comes in tank cars. There's 60-foot tanks and you see them all over the place.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, we tried to steal all the switch keys back so they wouldn't do that. Service with a smile.
Yeah, so. Yeah.
One,
well,
one other thing, in that presentation, there was the chart about the loading of the cars and how many bushels.
Mhm.
I was surprised. You remember a lot of cars were automatically marked inside. If you
Yes,
ever
the old-
checked box cars, it would say you could load oats to here, grain to here,
Right,
etc.
yeah.
They had all the markings inside, so they didn't have to worry about any calculation for loading a car.
Right, because different types of grain has a different weight per bushel.
Right.
And so you could load a lot more wheat into a car. It looked like a lot more wheat because it was lighter weight than, say, corn. And you're right, there would, inside box cars, you would see lines marked at different heights as the different type of grains. So that you could have a guy working at the elevator who didn't really need to read a lot. He just knew how far, what line to fill the car up to.
Right.
Based on what the agent or office manager told him. So, yeah, the whole aspect of moving grain and railroads and of course the structures used are just certainly fascinating. And I know Ron he's been sending photos out here of late asking me to identify him. And it's like, boy, Ron, I don't know. A picture of a grain elevator is. But yeah, but part two of this is on the concrete elevators, Ron. We'll have to get that sometime in the future, but I think you got your program, Greg.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Doug. I appreciate you stepping in. That was very nice.
Awesome.
Informative, great modeling. And
Yeah, and I do know that this guy's layout was written up. I don't know if it was a model railroader or one of the other Kalmbach layout planning books or guides. About the time it was the Kansas City NMRA convention, which was what, 4 or 5 years ago. So about that time, but there was an article done on his layout published.
Mhm.
I think it was in Craftsman.
Okay, maybe it was in Craftsman. All right. My magazines are all still packed away. This one thing hasn't got unpacked yet, so I couldn't look it up. But you know, if you've got a back issues for about 4 or 5 years ago, you might be able to look through and find his article, because he does a great. I remember walking into his basement and just amazed at the grain elevator complexes, and it was a basement. They were everywhere.
Wow.
You know, every town had, 1 or 2 of those complexes set up, as you saw in the photos. Just unbelievable. And all the related, the trucks, the propane tanks, all the related parts that go with the grain complex. So.
And
If
really
I could-
tiny,
Go ahead, Dave.
really tiny fine detail. This guy must not own a calf.
Yeah.
In response to Lester's comment about dusting it, guys might think I'm crazy, but what I use is I take my air compressor and pump it up to 30 PSI, and then I put my shop vac right next to it. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
It works, yep.
PSI will really take a lot of dust off everything.
Good
Yes.
idea.
Yep.
Dry air cans work too. Those ones you buy in the can, the dry air that sprays, you can use that the same way as you're using your compressor.
Mhm, mhm.
The key is to put your shop vacs right next to it, so you collect all that dust rather than just
Ah.
redistribute it.
And have a
Yes.
good nylon on it to catch the parts that come
Yep.
off.
Doug, if I could add another thing, the outfit that I worked for, Kansas and Oklahoma, was a Watco outfit. And they had pieces of Missouri Pacific and pieces of Santa Fe. And so they would be gathered and taken to what we called Yagi Yard. And you have to understand that when you take over stuff like this, you don't get fancy stuff. You get the bottom of the barrel. You get whatever is left over, and generally a lot of 10-mile-an-hour track.
Yep.
And so they would bring them into Yagi Yard. We only had 4 tracks in the main line, and 2 of the tracks were leased out by marketing for storage. So we basically had a siding, 1 track in the main, and we had to separate the cars that went to the BNSF and the cars that went to the UP. And then a train was made up and it ran from Hutchinson down to Wichita. But there was no place in Wichita to hold this other than outside of town. Because again, all we had in Wichita for a yard, except for the big chemical outfit, the big intertrain elevator, was just a few short tracks. And there was a damn road crossing right in the middle of it. So if you're trying to switch
Always.
something, you have to be watching that to make sure you got enough room. You got to bust the air hoses and all that stuff. But when the wheat started to move, you left the grain trains out of town until the other railroad said, we'll take it. And you're right. A lot of it did go south. A lot of it did.
Mhm. Well, and partly, you got to look at the time period that you're modeling, because I modeled 1949. Most of the grain at that stage was being used for animal feed, or if it was a grain that could be converted into human consumption type of foodstuffs. There was not as much export of grains as there was in the 70s and
Right.
today. So, you got to look at the area you're modeling as well as the equipment that was being used. For me, my grain elevators, I got a few of the concrete ones. Most are still the wood elevators, and it's all box cars. There were not the covered hoppers in use yet. But if you're modeling, 75 or 1990, it's covered hoppers almost exclusively. So, so I see in the chat, there was a note that from Jan Whitcomb that Milo is called grain sorghum, usually primarily used in animal feed, possibly could be used for ethanol production now, but yeah, so. Yeah, so, well, I'm going quick, Greg.
Nice job. Thank you
Nice
Sure.
job.
very much. Next week, we have Ken Thompson lined up to do a layout tour. Ken's been on here for a couple months or so, and so we're looking forward to that. And we are scheduled through May 18th, but if you want to do a presentation after that, we'll be glad to get you on the schedule. Just contact Ron or me.
Well,
And
sign me up for part 2 on this grain elevator thing, because Ron wants to see them concrete elevators.
oh yeah, that's a good idea. So we'll do that on the 25th of May then.
Yeah, okay.
Unless we have a cancellation before that, but yeah, that's a
Sure.
good idea.
Yep.
So now we're into June.
Yeah, so
That's
good.
great. Yeah, so thanks to everybody who's been presenting, and it's been great. We continue to get a lot of great comments on the YouTube page, and I always forward those along to the presenter. I think you can go on there if you have a YouTube Google account. You can go onto that page and directly respond to those people who are commenting. And if you don't, you can just send me a note, and I'll put it up there under the auspices of the NMRA Michiana division. So nobody knows who that really is, so I can post anonymously and get away. But anyway, so that's what's going on there. But yeah, we'd love to have anybody who's interested present. It's great that everybody's seems like a lot of people who have done it are getting more comfortable with it now, and so it's great to have access to all this information, and then of course the notoriety that you can achieve by being published on our YouTube site is unbelievable.
And
At
if
least
you're
200 people will know you.
because this is an NMRA sponsored body, you can also get points for your author certificate if you're an NMRA member by giving
Yes, you can.
presentations.
Yeah, it's technically a division level presentation, and so I can't remember the rules, but they're in the AP guidelines for that. So that's a good point, Doug.
Yep. So.
And I guess since I host it, I get half for each one, right?
Yeah.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Well,
You would
as
also
I
get
said-
volunteer points.
Yes.
There you go.
volunteer points, Yep.
All
So,
right. Well, I got my electrical certificate. At least that's what Ron tells me. So
Well,
I got
good.
one certificate now.
yeah.
So well on my
Well,
way.
as I told you, Greg, I've got a bunch of these in the can that have come from a variety of sources. They're not mine that I put together, but it's not that difficult to run the PowerPoint and
Right.
chit chat. So,
Well, and that's the nice thing about this group. If you get stuck on a slide, somebody will pick you up and tell you what you're looking at.
that's right. Yeah. So,
Nice.
Oh yeah, it's terrific.
We
So-
should take up a collection and send that Ken Jenkins a box of cigars.
no, probably maybe a box of styrene cement.
Well, yeah.
Brew goo, as Lester likes to call it, right?
Yep. Yeah. So,
All
well,
right.
I'm going to
well,
say goodnight. So,
yeah, me too. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. And until
See you
then, have
guys.
a great time on your layout. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.